Does the Green Goblin look cute to you? Does he make you want to smile? Well, forget it. He is the most sinister, most dangerous foe that Spider-Man ever fought. So the new Spider-Man series is upon us. I've actually watched a few episodes. I quite like it, and Norman Osborn seems to play a very prominent role in the series, a different role than he has in the comics, but we're going to see where that goes, and I thought, hey, this would be a really good time to take a look at Norman Osborn's role in the comics that I just mentioned, but like from the beginning, right? So it's early evolution of the Green Goblin. With other villains I've covered, like I do complain sometimes that different writers come on, it's always disjointed, and some things are really good because it's the collaboration that evolves the character to who it is, but sometimes I'm like, I wish one writer was there the whole time. This is strictly one series. The Green Goblin did not appear outside of Spider-Man. Spoiler alert, I guess. There were two different Spider-Man series, but anyway, mostly, almost every appearance that we cover here today is an Amazing Spider-Man, and most of them are written by Stan Lee, except for stuff towards the end. So today's episode might be a little more different than other ones, but either way, it's the Green Goblin. It's going to be a great time. So let's go, starting with Amazing Spider-Man number 14 by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Already, right from the beginning, we can see that his identity is cast in shadows, which is unusual for the time because generally we would get a backstory and a face reveal for these villains. Just get to know who they are and why they do what they do. Usually they wanted money, and almost always it was an accident. But the Green Goblin, as I mentioned, is a little different. Lee and Ditko introduced this whole Goblin mystery to give Spider-Man more of a serialized feel to it, to entice people to come back and keep reading it because the story's going to unfold as time goes. Also, we see he's working on what he calls a flying broomstick, a precursor to his Goblin glider, and he delivers the most ironic line possible. I made the controls simple enough so there's no chance for a fatal error. Anyway, the Green Goblin's plan is to hire a movie producer to make a movie where Spider-Man fights the Green Goblin and the Enforcers. And this is all real and is about to happen, but for the Goblin it was all just a ruse to defeat Spider-Man. So they jump him and they try their best. Outnumbered, Spidey runs into a nearby cave, but the Hulk was in that cave already. This would actually be the first meeting between the Wallcrawler and the Green Goliath. Spidey manages to escape the Hulk and finally gets to square off with his other green menace, and Spider-Man ends up falling from the Nimbus 2000 into a pool of water, which for whatever reason the Goblin assumes he defeated Spidey. The Hulk takes off, the Enforcers get arrested, and the Goblin and Spider-Man both go on with their lives. But they do further nail home that the Green Goblin's identity is a mystery. And really, there's zero hints to who he is, and zero hints as to why he has it out for Spider-Man, just they're establishing that who his true identity is a mystery. It is also worth pointing out that Norman Osborn has not appeared at all in the comics at this point. Harry Osborn hasn't even appeared, so the Goblin predates both of them. It's always fun to have a mystery. Also, apparently Lee and Ditko greatly differed on who the Green Goblin's true identity should be. We're going to touch more on that later as it becomes more relevant with the story. It's how it all unfolds, progressing. But that there was the first appearance of the Green Goblin, and I think he's drawn a little cuter, chubby little cheeks, but on a whole, his look is exactly what it would be forever. Aside from a few redesigns, this is his look. And a lot of his other iconic accessories start appearing in Amazing Spider-Man number 17 just a few months later. I am, of course, talking about pumpkin bombs and the Goblin glider, seen right at the beginning. And when the Goblin sees that Spider-Man is going to appear at the inaugural meeting of the Spider-Man fan club, it seems like that might be the best time to attack. And attack he does. When Spidey swings in to make his grand entrance, the Goblin cuts his web with his electrically charged frog. Look, they weren't all winners, okay? I'm just going to cut to the chase and say that in this issue, he does use a smoke bat and a fog ghost. Kind of a Halloween theme. Ooh, Goblin. But the pumpkin bombs, they'd stick around. Also, his finger laser. Zap. And since you've already seen, yes, the Human Torch is also here. And it's not a case of the Goblin not counting on fighting two heroes. On the contrary, actually, the Torch inadvertently prevents Spider-Man from stopping the Goblin sooner. But the fight does end when Spidey overhears that Aunt May suffered a heart attack and he runs away to check on her. This leads to wild speculation that Spider-Man is a coward. That was actually touched upon in my recent Kraven the Hunter video. It's all starting to get interconnected now. Amazing Spider-Man number 23 gives us a tale where the Green Goblin is trying to take over the mob in some of their territory. But obviously, whenever the Goblin shows up, Spider-Man isn't far behind. The Goblin uses this to his advantage and lures Spidey into the mobster hideout, hoping the Wallcrawler will take out the head, leaving the body ripe for controlling. Spider-Man deals with the mob and goes after the Goblin, and they fight to a stalemate, and the Green Goblin remains at large. But unfortunately for him, that entire family of mobsters was arrested, leaving no henchmen for the poaching. Now at this point, we still don't know anything about who the Goblin is or why he's after Spidey. But Stan Lee will say in interviews that the Green Goblin was created just to be the archenemy of Spider-Man, so take that with a grain of Stan Lee's salt. That's why the Goblin's getting a lot of appearances here right away in the start. And while there are contradictory stories about who Stan Lee and Steve Ditko both wanted the Green Goblin's true identity to be, I will show you this panel from this very issue set in the downtown Manhattan businessman's club that J. Jonah Jameson belonged to. Who's that guy sitting right there? His next few appearances are interesting. Firstly, Ditko does continue to sprinkle an as of yet unnamed Osborn into JJ's Businessman Club. Then we see the Goblin still trying to get a foothold on organized crime, and after that he takes a 10-issue break. But in these 10 issues we do meet Harry Osborn. Then through Harry we get a name and a connection for Norman Osborn, as well as his former partner whom he screwed over, Mendel Strom. He gets out of prison and has it out for Norman. He's got robots and Spidey intervenes, but Norman already had a plan to take out Strom. And when Spider-Man gets in the way of those plans, Osborn clocks the webhead and knocks him out. Then, an assassin, strongly implied to be Storm and Norman, shoots Strom from a window and makes a seemingly impossible getaway. Huge clues here to the identity of the Green Goblin, and reading it back now, it's super obvious. But in this issue, we just see Norman Osborn doing these things, and you might start thinking, But like I said, it's been 10 issues or so since we've seen the Green Goblin. We just see Norman Osborn doing these things. Green Goblin wouldn't be right on people's minds. I don't know if any of you guys were reading this back in the day. Do you guys remember this? And did you start figuring out Norman Osborn was a Green Goblin? Like me, with retrospect, I've always known it because this is 20 years before I was even born. And I'm old as fudge. Not that old. In the next issue, Norman Osborn puts on a fake beard and pays a dude to take out Spidey. He fails. Then we have Amazing Spider-Man number 39, and you know this cover. I actually used to have the Marvel Select figure of this cover, and I wish I still did. John Romita takes over the art with this issue, and the Green Goblin decides he's waited long enough, and it's time to end Spider-Man once and for all. So he tracks him down and hits him with gas to dull his spider sense. Then he follows him until he discovers his true identity as Peter Parker. And then he strikes outside of his house and carries him off. And since he's about to do away with the webhead, the Goblin returns the favor and reveals his true identity to Spider-Man as well. In case I hadn't made it obvious, Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin are in fact one and the same. What? And for whatever reason, Spider-Man's reaction is all, "You're Harry Osborn's dad." And when he sees a mention of the Goblin's son gets a rise out of him, Spider-Man keeps at it until he gets him monologuing. And we get the Green Goblin's backstory, and he is delusional. It's also worth noting here that every time we do see Norman interacting with Harry, he's a total douche. So when he talks about how he was the perfect father, but is juxtaposed with those actual images of him always being too busy and a total dick, we see what kind of mind we are working with. And then we see where he's putzing around with a formula he stole from the aforementioned Mendel Strom. It blows up in his face.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
Twisting his mind even further and enhancing his strength. So he turns into a criminal and becomes the Green Goblin. Like really, as I said earlier, most of these Spider-Man villains are in it for the money. But Norman Osborn's already a champion of industry. He's got all the money he could need, so he's just crazy. But while he is regaling Spider-Man in all their past adventures, the wall crawler manages to break free and they have an epic battle that ends with the Green Goblin getting amnesia due to comic book shenanigans, and he's lost the past few years of his memory. So for the sake of Harry, Spider-Man burns the Green Goblin costume and saves the life of Norman Osborn. There we have it. All's well that ends well, I suppose. But that's not the ending, is it? No. His next appearance is just as Norman Osborn. I actually covered it pretty extensively in my Kraven the Hunter video, so if you do want to check that one out, that would be awesome. Otherwise, if you could like, comment, subscribe, any one of those amazing algorithm assisting attributes would be awesomely appreciated. The next few times we see Norman Osborn, that's all he was, Norman Osborn. I'm sure he ran his business as usual and took care of his day-to-day affairs, but the only times we see him is when he's struggling with images in his mind of the Green Goblin. He's not sure why, but we know something is up. And after 2 years, the Goblin flies again in Spectacular Spider-Man number 2. He remembers who he is and where some of his stuff is stashed, and he goes not just for revenge, but the most excruciating revenge the world has ever known. Once Peter hears about Norman going missing, he begins to have nightmares and decides he needs to find the Goblin first. But the Goblin doesn't want to be found, not yet. He has plans. Those plans include an extremely tense dinner party. It's actually pretty awesome. Peter's not sure exactly how much Norman knows, and at that point really neither are we, and the whole thing is really tense. I love this scene, and obviously Sam Raimi would take cues from it for the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man film.
How did you say that happened?
Bike messenger.
Obviously, this all leads to a fight. One hell of a fight if I do say so myself, and it ends with Spider-Man just beating the holy heck out of the Green Goblin. But he's still pulling his punches as to not kill him. But if he can't kill him, then how can he keep his identity secret? Long story short, he drugs the Green Goblin with some pumpkin gas and terrifies him with his own mask. Like, he drugs and hypnotized Osborn into being so afraid of both the Goblin and Spider-Man that he forgets everything. Amnesia again. Amnesia again. If I'm being honest, this issue was awesome, but in the end, the return of the Goblin was just kind of lackluster, and it reset the status quo of just him going back to being Norman Osborn, forgetting everything. Realistically, you could have skipped this entire issue and not missed a thing, and that ultimately is disappointing. Like, if you're going to talk about bringing back the Green Goblin, bring back the Green Goblin to stay. Don't just bring him back for a bit and reset the status quo. Water. He's very thirsty. We would not see Norman or the Goblin for 2.5 more years until Amazing Spider-Man number 6. Mary Jane is making her debut in a new play, and the whole gang is going to see it, courtesy of Norman Osborn, who, it was worth noting, that Peter had just accepted a job from. Like the animated series that's on right now. Really, it's fine. Check it out, or don't. MJ makes a seemingly nothing comment that Norman used to own the building that her play is in. But after the play, Norman sees a door and something inside him changes. Peter notices this too and decides to check it out. But he is too late, because later that evening, when everyone had cleared out, Norman opened that door and found some of his Goblin gear and remembered everything. The next 2 issues have Spider-Man and the Goblin battling each other around New York. The Goblin's only goal this time is the complete obliteration of Spider-Man. It's also shown that the Goblin is a whole separate identity inside his head. When he is the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn does not exist. Of course, these are also both very special issues dealing with Harry Osborn's drug issue. And when the Goblin tries to attack Peter at home, he sees his son, whom he doesn't even recognize, but he knows something is familiar, and he just leaves. When he and Spider-Man face off again across the city skyline, the Webhead grabs the Goblin and steers him towards the hospital so he can see his son again. And the Green Goblin, seeing his boy helpless and in the hospital, he breaks down in tears and faints, once again succumbing to amnesia, which Spider-Man does like because that's the only way he can keep his whole identity secret without having to kill the Goblin. And killing the Green Goblin is something that Spider-Man's not even willing to consider. This issue ends with Peter reunited with Gwen Stacy. Is that important? I feel like you may already know the answer. If not, spoilers ahead. His next 3 appearances are inconsequential appearances as Norman Osborn. They are during the transition of writers from Stan Lee to Jerry Conway. But now so far, to me, we haven't had enough appearances of the Green Goblin to be considered the greatest villain the Spider-Man's ever faced. Yes, he's probably the only one that actually knows his secret identity, and that does make him a threat. But other than that, he's just been this guy that shows up once in a while and gets beat up by Spider-Man. Like, except for the time he drugged Spider-Man and captured him in the ropes, he's never really even been a physical match to overpower Spider-Man. Even that time, Spider-Man got away. And then, like I said, he just keeps getting amnesia over and over and over again and again and again and again, which is like just such a cop-out. This guy isn't a threat. He's just a minor annoyance that keeps coming back. And I feel like the whole greatest Spider-Man villain is largely, in fact, to what is about to happen in Amazing Spider-Man number 121. But yeah, like honestly, I found the whole amnesia thing lame and tedious. Amazing Spider-Man number 121, Harry is once again unwell due to his drug use, and this forms some cracks in the mind of Norman Osborn, causing him to lash out at Harry's friend Peter and then hallucinate images of Spider-Man. That's enough to bring the Goblin back to the surface, and this time he's done playing around. He gets on his glider and he makes a beeline right for Peter Parker's place to put an end to the prolonged punch-up. And there he finds Gwen Stacy and he takes her captive, and then he and Spider-Man fight. And again, Spider-Man is the clear victor, but before he can get to the girl, Norman swoops down and knocks her off the bridge. Was she dead before? Did the fall kill her, or did Spider-Man snap her neck? It doesn't matter. As far as anyone's concerned, the Green Goblin just killed the woman that Spider-Man loved. For the record, Spider-Man's web snapped her neck. The look on the Goblin's face shows it that he realized he's screwed up. He wants to run away, but Spider-Man is relentless in his pursuit. Spider-Man's wrestled with this before, but this time he means to kill the Green Goblin. Though when the opportunity presents itself, he doesn't. He stops himself from becoming a murderer. But the Goblin has one last trick up his sleeve, and he controls the glider to attack Spidey from behind.
Godspeed, Spider-Man.
And honestly, this scene was recreated perfectly in the Raimi film.
Oh.
So do the proud men die, crucified not on a cross of gold, but on a stake of humble tin. The Green Goblin dies by his own hand, impaled on his own glider, taking us back to his first appearance, where he assures that his glider has no chance for a fatal error. And after Spider-Man leaves, a figure in shadows that would eventually be revealed as Harry Osborn changes Norman's clothes, keeping the secret of the Green Goblin. And to go further into it, Norman Osborn didn't actually die there. He escaped to Europe, where he would actually raise the children that he believed he had with Gwen Stacy, even though they weren't children, and he didn't have sex with Gwen Stacy. That was implanted in his mind to trick him, and he raised 2 clones that were created using Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy's DNA. And even then, when he came back in the 90s, it was still another 20 years before these whole Stacy children thing came about. Comics are weird. Green Goblin, as far as we know, is dead. He would be dead for 25 years after this. Of course, that's Norman Osborn. The Green Goblin would be picked up by Harry Osborn would become the Green Goblin. Somebody that you don't remember would become the Green Goblin. Phil Urich became a heroic Green Goblin. And then, like I said, Norman Osborn would return and resume Green Goblin duties. I think I am going to dive further into Green Goblin and talk about many of his different phases, because he was the Gold Goblin, he was the Red Goblin when he merged with Carnage, he was just Norman Osborn, he was the leader of the Thunderbolts, he was the Iron Patriot. There are so many different phases of Norman Osborn for me to continue talking about, but When this series picks up next, it's going to be that forgotten Goblin that I mentioned earlier briefly, because there is another guy that took up the mantle of the Goblin, and that video is actually available right now if you are a member of the channel. Channel members is something I've slowly been rolling out, literally $1 a month. If you are able to do so, you get videos early and a few extra other perks, but it's just videos early. Videos will come out all the time. They're free for everyone. If it's not something you're into, don't worry about it. Like I said, free for everyone. They always will be free. You can get access to them a little early. Sometimes I'm on the ball and I upload videos weeks in advance. Other times you could get these things up to like an hour or 3 early. So I mean, anyway, yeah, if that's something you're interested in, check it out. Members, become a Hausstage officially. That would be awesome. If not, just please keep watching the videos because that is awesome too. Anyway, yeah, stay Haussy, folks, and I will catch you next time. Yeah. When did you stop recording? So when he tells about how he was a perfect father, but it's juxtaposed. Spider-Man burns the Green Goblin costume and saves the life of Norman Osborn. Don't know why I was wearing those, because the glare. Hey, I'm Haussmann Comics. Let's dive into it.